Luffy might be in trouble because the One Piece manga is quickly about to reach the climax of the Egghead Island arc, and this chapter just gave us hints of how the final battle is truly going to play out, which includes the powerhouse matchups, including Gear 5 Luffy against the Shadow Clone Jutsu Admiral Kizaru, the Awakened Lucci versus Zoro, and Saint Saturn against probably everyone else. But that's not all, because with most of the major characters coming together on the bottom part of the island, whatever climactic event we were promised to happen is surely about to blow up and turn this arc into the match that sets the final saga ablaze. But of course, to start, we first have to talk about Luffy versus Kizaru, because as I hoped, the Marine Admiral is not just going to be completely overwhelmed by Gear 5 Luffy. In fact, what I never expected was to see Kizaru bust out a Shadow Clone Jutsu and make a bunch of clones of himself out of light in order to take out Luffy. In fact, up to now, he honestly seems to be pretty much completely unfazed in general by Gear 5 Luffy, apparently being the only person to be fully resistant to Luffy's cartoon powers and even easily outsmarting Luffy by distracting him with the clones. Yeah, not the first time that we've seen Luffy being outsmarted, but it does make me wonder if we, and possibly Luffy as well, have been somewhat underestimating Kizaru a little bit. I mean, this man is a Marine Admiral who confidently asked if he should go to Wano to handle Kaido and Big Mom together, so maybe we should be wondering just how desperate the situation is for Luffy and the crew instead of the other way around. And while I'm of course gonna dive deeper into the fights in this chapter in just a moment, first I do have one more major question about Kizaru's new clone powers. I mean, we've seen many Devil Fruit users create clones before, like when the String Fruit user Doflamingo made a clone to tank this hit, and we've of course got Nico Robin, who makes tons of clones that she can even control, but both of these characters ate Paramecia type Devil Fruits, which allow them to control the substance that they produce. However, that is not the case for Kizaru, and as far as we know, Logia fruits have only ever been able to shoot out their elemental abilities, not really control them. For example, the Lightning Fruit user NL could launch massive bolts of electricity, and Admiral Akainu of course can blast people's face off with his Magma Fist, but creating separate clones that can act on their own, that is something we've honestly never really seen before from a Logia user, and I'm super curious to see what level of control Kizaru actually has over these. For example, is he somehow controlling the light, or are they independent beings physically that can actually act on their own? Or are they basically just light projections, kind of like the holograms that we saw earlier in this arc? Plus, we do have to ask how this is even possible in the first place, since we've never seen it happen before. And who knows, maybe it's just some form of his Light Fruit awakening, or it could just be some very special ability of the Light Devil Fruit. I mean, I honestly cannot wait to find out, because this seems fairly broken and kind of seems to have nothing to do with his powers so far. Now, despite how incredibly cool Kizaru looks showing off even more of his awesome abilities, I do have to say that I'm actually pretty disappointed in the direction that this fight seems to be going. And that's because, at least to me, please let me know if you feel differently, but it kind of looks like Kizaru is not 100% interested in actually fighting Luffy, if you know what I mean. Instead, he kind of keeps going after his different objectives, like when he tried to attack Vegapunk last chapter and in this one again. Likewise, Luffy is busy trying to protect his friends instead of going all out against the Admiral, which, by the way, that shot of him taking in Kizaru's light and splitting it like some kind of prism was just really awesome. Creme de la creme panel right there. But besides that, I'm just getting a really bad feeling that this fight is going to end with the Straw Hats and some allies escaping, instead of this like all-out actual clash Yonko versus Admiral that me personally, and probably also you, were really hoping for. However, on the other hand, and hear me out here, it might actually be a good thing, because we definitely won't be getting a long drawn-out fight like we would expect from a major battle just like this. I mean, do I need to remind you of the 49 chapter marathon like Luffy versus Kaido? And ultimately, this means that we should be getting to the promised epic finale of this arc, and then to Elbaf even faster, and kind of put the entire versus Admiral saga a little bit later in the story. Nonetheless, there is still plenty of fighting actually going on in this chapter though, and in particular, one major clash is of course Zoro against the now fully awakened once again leopard user Lucci. And I'm personally honestly honestly super excited to see how Zoro now stacks up against the government secret agents, because if Gear 5 Luffy absolutely destroyed Lucci, then Zoro's performance against Lucci should give us a pretty decent idea of how current Zoro actually compares to Luffy. Now, of course, we do have to consider the small chance that Zoro actually loses this battle, but honestly, I would be shocked and disappointed if that were to occur. I mean, even in his awakened form, I really don't think that Lucci is stronger than Kaido's right-hand man King. And if you remember, Zoro basically one-shotted King once he finally learned how to control his newly awakened advanced Conqueror's Haki. Although Lucci is probably a little bit more of a backstabbing, ruthless fighter than King, so who knows, maybe he will use some sort of dirty tricks instead of fighting Zoro straight out in a true one-on-one. We're just gonna have to see. And while we're speculating about the future here, this is also the perfect time to recap the possibility of the Vegapunks leaving the island with the Straw Hats, because in fact, in this chapter, Jinbei can even be seen taking a bunch of Vegapunks gear towards the Thousand Sunnies, so it does seem like there's a pretty good possibility that at least one of the Vegapunks will actually be coming along, though we do know what happened with... Oh, also in case you forgot, here are the latest updates on all 7 Vegapunks. We know from chapter 1090 that Chaka and Pythagoras were confirmed to be actually dead, although you know how that is in One Piece, Will of P and everything. Then we have the bite-sized Edison, who is still in the control room with Nami, Usopp, and the traitor York. Next is Lilith, who is currently piloting Frankie's giant mech, carrying the Straw Hat ship to the back of the island. And that just really leaves us with Atlas and the main body Vegapunk, who has driven this awesome Vega tank all the way to the battlefield in order to order the Pacifistas back to their side, which I was kind of hoping that he would be able to do. However, with all of them still scattered around the island like this, it's honestly really hard to tell how many, if any, of these Vegapunks will actually survive / make it on board of the Thousand Sunnies. But if I had to bet on at least one, I would say that Lilith will be the one to go with the Straw Hats, since not only has she been there the longest, but she's also the one who has been with the ship all this time as well. But of course, I simply cannot go any longer without sharing this awesome theory about the main Vegapunk, which actually makes a ton of sense for the epic finale of the end of this arc. So, okay, so hear me out, because as we've discussed before quite often, the Egghead Island arc has a lot of parallels to previous arcs like Marineford, Sabaody, and so on and so forth. But one connection I have not heard discussed as much are the similarities to the island of Ohara, which we saw during Robin's flashback. On that island, there was a ton of information, such as research into the poneglyphs that the world government didn't want anyone to share with the rest of the world. So let's bring this all back to Egghead Island now, because we have the reverse situation where Vegapunk has a ton of top secret information that he most likely doesn't want to fall into the world government's hands. And on top of that, he also knows about the poneglyphs and the ancient kingdom. So I can just imagine that as the Straw Hats escape, the main Vegapunk does 2 things. First, he sends out information about the ancient kingdom to the entire world, completing the work that was started once on Ohara. He could probably do this using the Punk records, which is kind of like the internet of the One Piece world. And secondly, I can very easily see Vegapunk pushing a self-destruct button or something like that to destroy the entire island of Egghead, just like the world government destroyed Ohara. Really, he would probably do this to prevent the world government from getting their hands on the Mother Flame energy source that they need to power their super weapon that can destroy entire islands. And if this sounds too crazy for you, remember that Vegapunk installed a self-destruct button on his previous lap on Punk Hazard as well, so it's actually not that insane to think that he has one here as well. And on the other hand, that mind-blowing situation, no pun intended, is exactly, of course, what Kizaru and Saint Saturn would want to prevent under all circumstances, because although this would most likely accomplish their goal of killing Vegapunk, it would mean that the other 2 main objectives of obtaining the Mother Flame and rescuing York are probably ruined. And who knows, maybe Saint Saturn might even be caught up in the explosion, which would be an even bigger shock to the world. And speaking of Saint Saturn here, his brief but kind of ominous appearance at the end of this chapter hopefully does mean that he will be joining the action soon. I mean, and so the only question is, what will this man be doing? Well, let's break it down, because no matter what way you look at it, it absolutely must be a part of the epic conclusion that we were told about that would end Egghead Islands. And of course, the first and most obvious thing that he can actually do is retake control of the Pacifista after the Vegapunks took them over this chapter again. Which, by the way, I have to ask, where are most of the Seraphim at this point? point? I mean, I do know that they were locked up in bubbles a few chapters ago, but wouldn't it make sense for them to join the battle if they're commanded by Vegapunk now? Or maybe they should stay locked up in bubbles to keep them from flipping sides once again. And honestly, I do hate to add onto the negative takes in this review, but I'm starting to get pretty tired of this whole 𝙻𝚎𝚐𝚗𝚗 and Pacifistas flipping sides all the time thing, because when these warlord clones were introduced, there was so much hype surrounding these characters, but all that hype is absolutely gone at this point, because one chapter they're allies and then in the next they're enemies. I mean, yeah, they are super strong, but then they were also taken out in one go by bubbles so far, so yeah. Although the one side of this that I would absolutely love to see is the 𝙻𝚎𝚐𝚗 somehow managing to gain control of themselves, which totally fits in with all the talk in recent chapters about being slaves to the government. For example, Kizaru feels like he has to follow orders, and Kuma used to be a world government slave as well. So wouldn't it be great if the ones who literally have to follow commands and have allegedly no free will could somehow manage to break free, especially with Luffy there? Anyways, rant over, subscribe to the channel, and now let's get back to Saturn. Now, it would be easy, of course, for him to command the Pacifistas because of the command structure that we were shown earlier in this arc. But besides that, I do need for Saturn to finally show off the mysterious powers that we first saw back in chapter 1085, because in case you forgot, I mean, not sure how, but in case you did, Saturn appears to have this kind of bull-like transformation with these giant horns here. And now we don't know if this is an actual devil fruit power or something else, but I just have to learn more about it. And what more perfect timing than the end of this arc when there is sure to be a massive conflict. And speaking of conflict, Sanji, who's been kind of robbed of fight so far, might actually be the first one to have to face off against Saturn, because he's currently with the main Vegapunk and the Pacifista. So how will Sanji respond to seeing one of the Elder Stars? Will he jump straight into an attack, or will he be busy fighting the Pacifista? Or will someone else come and make a mess out of this entire fight as well? Honestly, we've talked about it before, this would be the perfect time for the Blackbeard Pirates to finally make their appearance, although it would also be the perfect opportunity for them to go after the rubbings of the poneglyphs on the Sunny. That's because it's basically only protected by Lilith and Jinbei at this point. Or an even crazier option might be if someone like the marine hunting organization Cross Guild showed up and truly shocked the world by taking out one of the Gorosei on their own. Like, man, that would be insane. Plus, it would give us the chance to see Luffy and Buggy finally reunite again, which honestly, I just love these characters so much that I made an entire video explaining how stupidly powerful Luffy would be with a second devil fruit, including Buggy's surprisingly overpowered Chop Chop fruit. And if you want to see just how insane things get with some of these super wild combinations, you can watch that video right here. Thanks for watching as always. It was a really fun chapter, and I will see you in the next one.